I'm Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Okay, this is going to be fun. We're going to call this one the broken clock theory. And I've talked on this many times. I've also been telling you guys for many years here, be careful with who you're listening to. Everyone's got an opinion. The problem is that if they're giving you an opinion on what's going to happen this year or next year or 6 months from now or over the next few months in real estate or the stock market, guess what? They're guessing. They have no clue. You cannot guess what a market is going to do in the short term, no matter what that market is. You're just taking a guess at it. There's too many variables. There's that old saying, even if the market is overpriced and is not, a rational market, there's that old saying, well, markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent trying to short a market like that. And another one of my favorite quotes out of, I think it was a Jack Bogle book, talking about a money manager, hedge fund guy that used to say that, these broken clock theorists, the guys that predict that the market's going to crash and over again, because, hey, even a broken clock is right twice a year. They know eventually they're going to get it right. It's an ego-driven thing with these guys. They know, hey, eventually I'm going to get it right. The only problem is it might be 5 years before I get it right. And as this hedge fund or private equity guy said, do you want to be right and have your ego padded, or do you want to make money? And the way you make money is just buying quality companies and buying quality real estate and then hanging on to it. There's going to be ups and downs in the short term, but over the long term, you're going to do incredibly well. So, this broken clock theory, this has been talked about many times in so many of the business books I've read over the years, the good ones. Wall Street Journal brushes on this all the time. There's some guys that I follow on Twitter lately that have been really laying in, and it's entertaining for sure, about several of these guys that I'll talk about in a minute here. They're all working off this broken clock theory. Listen, there are a number of them in Vancouver real estate. They're probably over the last 15 years or so, I could probably count 100 or more that either had a blog or a YouTube channel or would show up at the CKNW or on Bloomberg or whatever, BNN, and say, market crash is coming. Vancouver real estate market is overpriced. We're headed for a 50-60% correction. Sell now, get out. And they continue to get their heads handed to them. They're guessing at this short term. But it's the broken clock theory. The reason they do it, there's a number of reasons, and I'll give them to you here. The first one is ego. Most of these guys have massive, massive egos. They'll throw this stuff out there that the market's going to crash, the S&P 500, Apple, Google, Facebook, overvalued. They know that eventually, they're going to get it right. The problem is that I've said before, these market doomsdayers, and predictors are never wrong. They're just early. And the markets could continue on for another 10 years, go up another 150%, and then finally you do get that correction, which doesn't last long, and it goes down 10%. So you still would have been up 100 or 110% if you just would have stayed the course. And that's the thing people get tricked into here. These egos of these guys that come out there make people do really dumb things. And I'll be honest, I capitalize on this stuff all the time. Look at all the dumb stuff that was done in Vancouver real estate out of COVID. I did many blogs on the fire sales and the dumb things that sellers did around that time, because they watched the news, they watched these economists, they watched these guys, read these articles in the Vancouver Sun and the province saying that real estate market in Vancouver is going to crash. We're all going to move out to the suburbs. Nobody's going to want to live downtown because it's not going to be safe. We're going to work from home. There's no need to be paying $750,000 for a one-bedroom anymore. Sell now, get out quick. Some people listened to it. I did many blogs back then, have a look at them, and gave away these condos at fire sale prices. Some of them were just ridiculous, where they're up probably over $100,000 now on those condos, maybe even 130, 140 on one bedrooms from those fire sale prices. I was working with lots of buyers in 2020 and even earlier this year. We got some very good prices that look now in hindsight that, these people shouldn't have given away those condos at that price. That's what happens. It happens the same thing in the stock market. People will listen to an economist saying that this is going to go down or that's going to happen. There's always a dark cloud out there. People sell stock and you can pick them up at good prices as long as you've got that holding period. You're buying the right companies and you're going to hold them. The second thing is, they know the reason these guys do that is they know a broken clock is right twice a day. And that's why they throw this out. But the crazy thing is there's never any accountability for when they're wrong. You notice that? These guys will predict a market correction, and they're out there all over the place. You can go on Twitter and they lambaste these guys. It doesn't happen, and then they quietly slink away. Or what they often do too is they'll just keep moving the goalpost. This year the market's going to crash. It doesn't happen. Then they'll come out next year and move the goalpost for the following year. They know eventually they're going to get it, but the problem is that you have to know the timeline. He first predicted that 6 years ago. The S&P 500 is up 114% since then. So when you do get that 10 or 15 or 20% run-of-the-mill correction, you would have been far better off just staying the course. The final thing they do that is to get attention and get clicks. It's usually a monetary thing there. I've said how many times I talked about how negativity, the dark stuff outsells the positive stuff 10 to 1. The positive message that I list out here, a lot of people will say, oh, and I'm surprised you only have, 8,000 subscribers. We expect you to have a lot more. Well, I'm not really, because if I wanted to change this blog over to a doomsday blog, that Vancouver real estate is overpriced and everything is going to go down, sell, complain about everything, then I would probably get 10 times as many subscribers, because that's just the way it is. Negativity sells. It gets clicks. That's why these dying media outlets, that's all they can put out there now. CNN, I often pick on, the constantly negative network. They survive on negativity. They survive on keeping people in fear. And there's enough people out there that they're drawn to it like a moth to a flame, and it keeps them in that fear ecosystem. They never get out of it. And once you're in it, you're doomed. Markets go up and markets go down, and nobody can predict a market and what it's going to do in the short term. You have to understand that. Instead, extend out your holding period. Buy quality companies, index invest, buy your principal residence, and just keep the damn thing, as I often say. Ignore all these broken clock theorists, because they're idiots. They really are. I'll give you just a few prime examples here. And this has been on a couple of guys. Wall Street Journal had that we're talking about this broken clock theory. And then a couple of guys that I follow on Twitter now have really dedicated their Twitter feed to these guys. They talk a lot about this Michael Burry guy. This was the guy that was featured in The Big Short, who shorted the housing market. BNN loves to roll this guy out. So he's ahead of a company called Scion, and they're a private equity company, investment company, hedge fund. This guy loves to short everything. He shorts stock, and then his game plan is he goes out into the media, and BNN falls for it, and will talk down the book, as they say it, so that hopefully people will listen to him, sell the stock down so that he makes money. But this guy, he's a one-hit wonder. He's a broken clock. He's had very little success in the last 10 years after that housing short, which, by the way, I've often said too, if you dig a little deeper on him, he made some money on that, and they featured him in the movie, but he was a small player. There was guys that had way more conviction on that housing short than he did. As a matter of fact, if you dig a little deeper on him, a lot of these guys will go out shorting things. If this guy, I'll tell you, shorted the Canadian banks last year, but they hedge them. You have to dig a little deeper. They don't really have a whole lot of conviction, so they hedge it to the other side just in case they're wrong. But this Burry guy, he's a guy that came out last year. BNN was all over this, shorting all the Canadian banks. Well, Canadian banks have gone up 100% since then. Do you ever hear him talk about the Canadian banks? I tried to see if I could find anything about it. Nothing. He just quietly got out of the position and moved on to another short. That's the way these guys work. They're the boy that cried wolf, and they get people to do stupid things. Some people would have probably listened to him, thought, hey, this guy's got, he shorted the housing market and got that right, but hey, that was 10 years ago and hasn't done anything right since. I'm going to sell all my Canadian bank stocks, and you just missed out on 100% return. There was a guy on BNN not long ago, Barry Schwartz, who's I think a really good guy to listen to on there. He was talking too about the number of guys that had their heads handed to them over the years shorting Canadian banks. Usually, they are not from Canada. They're usually from the States or someplace else. So they don't understand how our system works here. They think, yeah, the housing markets are overpriced here in Canada. These banks are going to end up holding the bag. Well, they don't understand how difficult it is to get a mortgage here. And besides, all the high ratio mortgages are insured by the government. But the other guys they've been really lambasting here, Robert Kawasaki. I know some of you guys like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know a whole lot about this guy. All I know is that there's some guys on Twitter here and on YouTube that were posting a graph of all the warnings that Robert Kawasaki has been laying down for the last 10 years, that the stock market crash is imminent. This went on and on. They have a 10-year graph of all the stuff that he's been saying, and yet the market, sure, there's been some 5 and 10% corrections along the way. We had the big COVID correction, which was substantial. But overall, for the last 11 years or so, if you would have just stayed the course, you would have, tripled your money. If you would have listened to him and done a dumb thing and sold because of his prediction, you would have been dead wrong over and over again. Another guy they've been lambasting is Mark Cuban. Another guy they have a graph on who's, I'm out of stocks, I'm out. Stock market crash coming. And yet he's just, the market over the last 10 years, S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, is on a trajectory up. If you look closely, there's dips along the way, just like in Vancouver real estate. But the point I'm making here, just be careful with these broken clock guys. They're everywhere. Everywhere. And they get attention because they're throwing out the, negative news gets attention. The stop, do something, sell, crash is coming. Whereas if you listen to, there's lots of great guys on CNBC and Bloomberg and in Wall Street Journal that will say the opposite of that. Don't try and time a market. I'm the same way. Buy and hold good quality assets and just stay the course. And on the dips we do get, which are going to be normal, try and keep a little dry powder and buy on the dips. But that doesn't get any news attention because that's boring stuff. Who wants to hear that? Who wants to hear a guy touting the long-term benefits of stock ownership and real estate and all the things it'll do for you? The tax breaks and the sheltered growth and everything else. That's boring. I want to get this Bury guy on here who's shorting the Canadian banks, who thinks we're going to a deep recession. The S&P is going to drop 40 to 50% in the next few months. Just wait. This guy, he's like a little kid. Just recently, he's been in a couple of spats with some guys who have taken the other side of this. And he was shorting some tech stocks just recently. He was on the wrong side of that again, sold his short position out at a big loss, and then he deletes his Twitter account. The guy has apparently deleted his Twitter account about 6 times. He's like a little kid. When he loses, he deletes his Twitter account, and then when he's ready to do another short and scream from the rooftops, he'll start his Twitter account back up. Don't fall for this, folks. Be really careful. Just tune it all out. You'll be far better off for it. Markets go up and down. If you want the long-term superior returns of real estate and in equities and getting your RSP working for you and your TFSA, if you want those superior returns, you have to put up with some volatility. It would be lovely if it went in a straight line, but that's not going to happen. You're going to get we get 5 to 10% pullbacks in the S&P a year. We should get a 20 or 25% correction every 3 years or so, and something around 50% or more every decade. That's what you sign up for. And it would be the same. Vancouver real estate isn't nearly as volatile as that, but we get these pullbacks, these run-of-the-mill corrections in Vancouver real estate. They should be expected, but don't try and time the bottoms. If we are going to get a correction moving forward, which we're going to get, it'll probably be because of interest rates. And it'll probably pretty much offset. Sure, the price will be less, but the borrowing costs will probably make up for it. So be careful who you listen to. This is the one thing I keep telling people. I sound like a broken clock. The thing because people ask me, what is hold people back the most? And I tell them it's listening to the wrong people, listening to a lot of this media junk, this doomsday narrative that they're always pumping to try and keep you in a state of fear. And I see it every day in my business, people living in fear. And the questions they ask me on my YouTube channel about interest rates going up, and it's got me on the sidelines, or a recession coming, or inflation. It's always something. It will never end. I've been in this business 35 years as an investor in real estate and stocks now, and I've never known a time when there wasn't a whole lot of dark clouds on the horizon. Yet I continually just buy and add to my positions, and I'm comfortable with the fact that there's going to be good years and bad years along the way. But this money is earmarked long term, especially your retirement funds. And if you're buying a house, you guys know my golden rule: 8 to 10 year holding period. Otherwise, rent. It might work out fantastic for you. You buy a house and it never goes down. It takes off from day one and you're never underwater on it. But as I've said, 50% of all the homes I've bought are worth less than what I paid for them. It's usually in the first few years, though. After 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, it's smooth sailing after that. You've got capital gain there because you've also done a tremendous amount of damage to the principal payment with our low interest rates here. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to all my new subscribers. Thanks for everyone that continues to buy my book on Amazon after all these years. I'll see you next week.